And now, direct from Las Vegas, it's Football Forecast Weekly.
For Football Forecast Weekly, I'm Trip Mitchell. And those of you of a certain age, do you remember the old movie Walking Tall with the sheriff with the big stick? Well, the sheriff's walking tall right now, and his name's Dennis Tobler. Dennis, go ahead.
Thanks, Trip. Right here in Betting Central in Las Vegas. First thing I want to do is I want to comment a little bit on last week's rant we had about sports journalists. I just want to prove to you that I'm coming from a position of strength on this. And what makes me the new sheriff in town is because I was the old sheriff in town. One of my biggest pet peeves in this business is people who purport themselves to be experts who have no business giving advice to people to bet real money on these games. And there's no worse outlet than the Las Vegas Review-Journal newspaper. This is a closed society of a group of, I don't know what you might want to call them, press-hungry lunatics, because they frankly don't know what they're talking about when it comes to betting on sports and football in particular. And I've got some examples for you so you don't have to take my word for it. Here we're looking at Friday's paper for Saturday's college game. At the top it says, this week's best bets, and they have four guys there who are supposedly well known. One's a sports editor, one broadcasts high school football games, another one claims he's the best in the world. Their picks went 1 and 3 for the weekend, and the guy that won his game only won because he used an inappropriate point spread line. The major part of the betting section for the Saturday games comes from a little lady who Don Best Incorporated decided to make a professional handicapper and put this whole spread on the sports section of the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Well, just so you know, her top college plays for Saturday were Bowling Green, a 40-point loser, and Iowa State, a humongous loser at home. Throw that in the trash. Now to further make my statement about these people who claim to be experts that aren't, and then I'll follow up with my credentials. We're looking at Sunday's paper here. You can see the check marks. The local analyst who wrote this article went 5 and 10 on the weekend's games. They also have 10 people who they pick off the street. Some of them are sportsbook operators. Some of them are handicappers. Some of them are journalists. Anyway, each one of them picks 5 games for the weekend's action in the NFL. 5 of these guys had a record of 1 and 4. One guy went 0 and 5, and that one guy just happened to be the head bookmaker of one of the largest sports books in this town. Now, why would you take information from a sportsbook director in the first place? His job is to take your money from the other side of the counter. Do you think he's really going to give you plays he wants you to walk into his store and walk out with the money on? No, it's a built-in conflict of interest that needs to go away. I want to see him come out of the newspaper. Okay? So let's go on through with these guys. 5 of 10 went 1 and 4. The local bookie went 0 and 5. Out of the 50 selections between the 10 handicapping experts, they were 15 and 35. Now you try to make up the rest of the season after going 15 and 35 betting real money. So take this newspaper and these guys who call themselves experts, throw it in the trash, and find somebody that you can count on that believes that he's going to try to make you money. Now, what puts me in a position to say this? Because I've been involved in every part of this business for over 35 years, from here to the islands. And the reason I'm back in Las Vegas now is because the islands are all set up. And actually, the islands are the ones that make the line for the sports books here. And everything is really done from offshore. These guys here are amateurs. They act like it, they talk like it, they pick like it, and it really irritates me that they are called the experts. Okay? So if you really want to check out some background, go to www.dennistobler.com. You'll see about 30 years worth of experience and expertise that nobody can put up to compare with. So that gives me the authority to call these losers out. And now that I've had my rant, I'll send it back to you, Trip. and I'll be back with the college games in just a minute.
Thanks, Sheriff. We appreciate the fact that you're on a little bit of a roll there. But in Vegas, it's a very closed group of handicappers who get all the respect in the local media. Now, they're not necessarily good handicappers, or in the case of the first couple of weeks of the season, they're pretty poor. But they get all the publicity. And you know what? It doesn't matter what kind of publicity your handicapper gets. Get a good one, and Dennis Tobler is a very good one. And on Tripp's Tips, I'm doing pretty well. 3-1 last week, if you include the A&M free pick. Well, let's talk about the games this weekend. And it's not the type of schedule we had last week where we had all the interest in the A&M Alabama game, but we've got a good one in the Midwest. Michigan State going up to Notre Dame. Michigan State getting 6.5, 7 points. They're an 11-3 under this coach's administration when they're road dogs. They have got a very solid defense, only giving up 177 points a game. So I like them a lot. We'll get Dennis's opinion in just a second. On the other side of the ball, Notre Dame lost their quarterback due to eligibility issues, but the new QB has tossed for almost 1,000 yards in the first 3 games. Now, we've got to remember Notre Dame did lose that game against Michigan earlier in the year, and Michigan very lucky to get past Akron this past weekend. But I like this game a lot. Now, I'm a Midwestern guy, so that's why I'm going to be very interested in this game. Now, let's go out to the West Coast, where the Pac-12, we've got 2 undefeated teams. One team we knew was going to be undefeated, and that's Stanford Cardinal. A lot of publications have got them in the top 3 or 4, and they're a team that legitimately could get to that national championship game coming up in January, and I'd love to see that little West Coast to East Coast action. Oregon would be the other team I'd like to see from the West to play potentially Alabama in that game. Now, Stanford's going up against ASU. ASU, the big win last week against Wisconsin. This is an important game for ASU. They're on their way back, pass-happy attack. I'd like to see them do well. The Cardinal going off 6.5, 7-point favorite. The person who I trust on all these games, the Sheriff. Dennis, tell me what you think of these games.
No kidding, Trip. We had one tremendous weekend last weekend again. I can't believe it. I've been up 30% of the bankroll 3 straight weeks in a row on my Gold Star selections right here on this website. So back to college action this week. First of all, the Notre Dame-Michigan State game is one of the big games on the board. However, it won't get my eyes because I don't care about either one of them. Frankly, the Big Ten is a very weak conference, maybe the 4th or 5th best in the country, maybe the 6th or 7th. Last week, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Penn State, Illinois, all lost straight up. Not to mention Michigan, who was the victor over Notre Dame earlier this year, was granted a victory. Let's say that. They were granted the victory by referees' calls because they lost the game twice on the 2 final plays of the game, and each time the referee threw a flag, stopped them, gave them a chance again. They were going to score again. And on the final play of the game, you must go back and review it. The backfield judge is the only one standing in the end zone. The receiver comes out of the backfield for Akron and is tackled right in front of the guy as the ball sails over his head. And that should have been a holding and a first down for Akron. It wasn't. Wasn't called. Game over. Akron loses. Michigan escapes with a very weak win. So Michigan's win over Notre Dame just proves how weak Notre Dame actually is. So in this game, where Notre Dame's a 6.5, 7-point favorite, I'm going to just simply take Michigan State and let all of you people watch the game because I could care less. Now on the West Coast, we got a pretty good conference called the Pac-12 Conference. And in that conference this week is a tough matchup between Arizona State at Stanford. The Cardinals are favored in this game, obviously, by about 7 points. And ASU's coming off a big win over Wisconsin. And I don't care what anybody says, they beat Wisconsin. So they have to go on the road to play Stanford this week, and it might just be a little much for them. Although they have a tremendous passing game, and will get better as the year goes on, Stanford is still one of the cream of the crop in that league, along with Oregon. I don't want to lay the points here. I have no opinion on this game, so if I was going to watch it, if it went 6.5, I would probably take ASU. If it goes 7 or 7.5, I would probably take, or vice versa. If it goes 7, 7.5, I would take ASU. If it goes down to 6.5, I'd probably find my way to Stanford. But as far as I'm concerned, the 2 marquee games this week are really small opinions on my part. So back to you, Trip.
Dennis, I knew you grew up playing football in Nebraska. It's nice to see you come out and call them out. That game against UCLA last weekend potentially going to cost Coach Pelini his job. What an embarrassment for the whole conference. Let's talk about the NFL this week. And last week's game, everyone looking at the San Fran-Seattle game, weather definitely had a factor in that. And you know what? Either of these two teams could very well be playing in the Super Bowl. That game will be in New York, New Jersey area in the month of February, average temperature 31 degrees. And don't think that those temperatures and that conditions wouldn't favor Seattle or San Francisco or the team I'm going to talk about in a second, Green Bay. Three northern teams used to bad elements. And let's say hypothetically they were going up against Manning and Denver. He's not a great quarterback. You remember he played in Indianapolis indoors. He's only 1-3 in adverse conditions in his career, really adverse conditions. So that's something to think about when you're handicapping the Super Bowl coming up in February. But let's talk about this week's matchups. The one I'm really interested in is Green Bay at Cincinnati. Now, Aaron Rodgers has been one of the best quarterbacks. He's an MVP, Super Bowl winner. I think he's going to come out very strong against Cincinnati. Cincinnati, a big game against Pittsburgh on Monday night, so there's bound to be a little letdown here, though they are a quality team, and I'd like to see them go a long way in the AFC. Now, the other game I'm going to talk about is insane, and this is why point spreads make every game fun to watch. If it wasn't for spreads and betting, who would care about Jacksonville traveling all the way? I mean, that's as far as you can go in this country, far southeast to the northwest, to play the number one team in football, Seattle. But you factor in the 19.5 points, and all of a sudden it becomes interesting. I've really vacillated. I'm going to make a play on this game. It's going to be a small play, but I'm going to have fun with it. Now we'll take it down to the sheriff in Vegas to hear what he has to say.
Oh, what a tremendous game that was between Seattle and San Francisco. And although I like San Francisco a whole lot, I have to give Seattle credit for that big win. The only thing I have to say is this. How would you like to play in the rain in that geeked out stadium with a bunch of computer geeks screaming their lungs out and rain hitting you in the face, wind blowing through the field? It's hard to win up there, and I'll give Seattle a credit, but if they meet on a neutral field, the 49ers are the better team. This week, of course, there's some big matchups. We were all over Cincinnati on Monday night, both Tripp and I, and my clients on my Gold Star selections. And Cincinnati came through with flying colors. We realized Pittsburgh is down this year, and we knew what would happen in this game. Different story this week. Cincinnati plays Green Bay. Andy Dalton's going to have his problems getting the ball down the field. But I can tell you something, just like I did in week 1, that Aaron Rodgers has no problem moving that Green Bay offense. And the way Cincinnati played on defense, they held a weak Pittsburgh team with no threats offensively to 10 points, and the referees kind of gave away that game too. I'm going to call out the linesman in that game, called a tripping penalty that changed the whole outcome of the game when there wasn't even an infraction. I'll tell you what, these referees, you better watch them, because remember Tim Doherty, the NBA referee that went to jail for fixing games? He's now out on the street here in Las Vegas, and he's a sports information salesman. So you got to watch out for these referees, and I think they need to take a look at that linesman that worked that game that night, because it threw the direction of the game in the opposite direction, but we'll take it. Back to the Cincinnati matchup this week with Green Bay. Should be a high-scoring affair. Green Bay will get the win. They'll cover the number, and they're going to win big all the rest of the games they have, because they have a weaker schedule. They started tough and end weak. And as far as you're concerned, Tripp, about your mentioning of the huge point spreads in the NFL, we never seen anything like this before, because the whole game has changed, and it's a different era of football. With the Jags being a 19-point underdog at Seattle, don't be surprised if Seattle beats them so bad that 19's covered by double that number. So I'd have to take Seattle and lay the 19. However, I won't, and it won't be one of my Gold Star selections. The other big game of the week is Denver again, okay? Denver, they're hosting at home. They're without their left tackle to guard Peyton Manning. Somebody else is going to step in. They're 15-point home favorites in the matchup. I'm pretty sure Denver will get that 15 points in the first quarter. So I think Denver will cover the huge number too. It's almost gotten to the point in the NFL that the higher the point spread, the more you bet the favorite. So for this week's action, the best bet that you can do is to get on the website and check out my Gold Star plays. Along with Tripp's tips, we are hitting a phenomenal percentage of point spread winners. So if you want to put money in your pocket, we can beat any Standard & Poor's hedge fund result, any bank interest rate, or any other kind of investment you want to try to make in the stock market or whatever. My selections are up over 70%. If you started with a $1,000 bankroll, you now have $1,700. If you started with $10,000, you now have $17,000. That's the way you play the game. My built-in, money-managed bankroll system will make you a winner. Check it out today. We'll be back again next week. Thanks to everyone for watching.
Hey Dennis, you're so right. You know, getting back to these handicappers in Vegas, they've been a lot of guys who've got a lot of publicity, but what have they done recently? Speaking of what they've done recently, let's look at Dennis's Gold Star selections. He's had a great year, up a lot of units. If you're going to go with a handicapper, go with one smart one and stick with them all year, and be sure to pay attention to the money management aspect of handicapping and betting. That is so, so important. Speaking of a good handicapper, I'm going to talk about myself for a second. Tripp's tips last week, 3-1. We're very proud of that. So with Dennis Tobler, you're going to get some great information and some great money management, and you're going to get some good tips from me. So either way, you're going to be in the green. For everyone at Football Forecast Weekly, I'm Tripp Mitchell. For Dennis Tobler, the Sheriff, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.